Welcome everyone, I'm Yvonne Davis and today is Sunday, November 8th, 2020. So I was thinking about this issue, this idea of Trump's that he's going to try to do recounts and use the courts and petitions to try to overturn the outcome of the election. And I thought maybe you might still be feeling nervous, even though in my last two videos, I tried to make it very clear it's not going to happen. But I thought, it still can be, after the nerve-wracking 4 years we've been through, it might still be difficult to feel calm and reassured. So I thought I would go ahead and look at another chart and show that to you to help you feel even more confident that everything's going to be okay. So before I pull up that information, I want to say really quickly that if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please click on the red button in the corner and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. And I hope you'll click like on this video and share with friends and family and on social media. And if you need a reading, you can always look for the link in the description box below. And if you want to become a patron, also there's a link in the description box below or at the end of this video. All right, so let me pull up some information. I'm going to start with where we are right now. And so let's see here. It's this article on Al Jazeera says, recounts. What are the rules in key contested states? So Trump's to seek recounts in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia, where apparent winner Biden is ahead by narrow margins. Okay, I don't know if he's going to try in any of the other states. I knew for sure he had already said he was going to try in Wisconsin and Georgia, and looks here like Pennsylvania. I don't know if he's going to try any of the other states. But what I wanted to do was just to show you, I just Googled final election results 2020 before making this video, just to make sure I had the most up-to-date information. And the Associated Press still has Joe Biden at 290. Whenever they do finally finish the recount of Georgia, because it's in his favor, most likely it's still going to go to Joe Biden, and that will bring him up to 306, which is the exact electoral count of 2016, which at that time was in Trump's favor. But it is interesting because, what we were talking about a lot was the fact that we felt very confident that Joe Biden was going to win the popular vote. But I know I had some fear, even in looking at the astrology, that with the Mercury stationing direct on election day, just like in 2000, that we would have the problem again of one candidate, the Democrat, having the popular vote, but the other, the Republican, having possibly the electoral college vote. So I was super glad that it didn't work out that way. I mean, you don't know how relieved I was. Well, you do know, okay, because you felt it too. All right, so anyway, it is interesting. Not only did Biden get the popular vote, he did also get the electoral college vote. So then, there's this question of, is there any chance that these recounts or anything Trump tries to do in the courts could overturn that? So I wanted to look at this first, just to get us grounded in where we are right now with the actual numbers. And so you can see here that currently Joe Biden's popular vote is at 75,241,784. And Donald Trump's is 70,800 something. So, so you can see that that is almost, well, I'm wanting to stretch it, but it's definitely over 4 million more, definitely. And that was actually the largest number of people who would ever vote for a presidential candidate in history, in the history of the United States. So that was pretty exciting. And then as far as the individual states go, Georgia had the most narrow gap, and it's over 10,000. So Biden is ahead by over 10,000 in Georgia currently. I don't know if they're still counting. They've got 99% reporting. So, it's possible it could change slightly. But the point was that if we go back to the states where he's trying to get a recount, the issue is that it really is statistically impossible because Pennsylvania is 20 electoral college votes. And I'll go back over here again because it shows the number of electoral college votes that each state has. Pennsylvania was the most important one because it had 20 electoral college votes, and then Wisconsin has 10. So the point is that, if he, the only thing that could even be possible is if he could somehow get two states like Nevada and Arizona to do a recount and change the outcome, then, or that, because that was an equivalent of I think, see, that was 17, I think. Or if he could get, he'd have to get both Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, okay? Because if he just got Pennsylvania, that's 270. And then Donald Trump would still have to overturn at least one more state or do something, because he still wouldn't, he'd have to at least get a tie, So, but still that would go to the House, and the House would choose Joe Biden. Joe Biden won the popular vote. It's just, and the House is controlled by Democrats. So Trump would basically have to get Pennsylvania and at least one other state. Okay. So that means he'd have to overturn the count in at least two states, not even including Georgia, because this doesn't include Georgia. Once Biden gets Georgia, he's up to 306. So if you take Georgia out of it completely, Trump still I guess Trump still has to win 2 or 3 states. Okay. He has to overturn Pennsylvania, and then he has to win at least 1 or 2 other states. It's statistically impossible, and everybody's saying that except for people who want to live in the delusion. I was thinking, like, what would I compare it to when I say it's statistically impossible? And I thought, it's like if you tried to shoot a BB gun from the White House lawn and hit an amoeba on Mars, it's impossible. Sure, you can stand out there on the White House lawn and you can point the BB gun toward Mars and you can shoot it, but you're not going to hit the amoeba on Mars. So it's just impossible what he's trying to do. It's statistically impossible. So the only reason he's really doing this is because he is, it's not that it's not statistically possible for him to overturn the count. And it's not legally possible for him to overturn the count because, the states have their own laws. And so you might have a legal capacity to bring a case to say, I want to recount. But the recount, that doesn't mean it changes the outcome, there are limits to what you can do legally. You can't bring frivolous cases. And if he thinks he can bring it all the way to the Supreme Court, he's just not in touch with reality. You have to have a legal case to stand on. You can't just bring a frivolous case because you don't like the outcome. It doesn't work that way. So, so it's statistically impossible. It's legally impossible. And furthermore, when you get right down to it, his term ends at noon on January 20th, 2021. And if there, by some bizarre, just, unbelievably tragic circumstances, somehow Biden couldn't be inaugurated, and Kamala Harris couldn't be inaugurated, then Nancy Pelosi would be inaugurated, So it's just, I mean, the stretch is so out of the realm of the conceivable that he's delusional. And that's before we've even looked at the astrology. So now let's go look at the astrology. And, I know I've mentioned this before, but some of you are new. I actually have a degree in political science from the University of Denver. I graduated cum laude from the University of Denver with a degree in political science. And now I do astrology because it's a lot more fun. Okay, so, and also I worked in law for 20 years. So I have a background in political science and I have a background in law. And I also have a background in astrology. So now we're going to look at the astrology. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that you probably remember a year ago 4 years ago, when we all found out when we were all horrified to find out that Trump had won the Electoral College and that he was going to become, or he was the president-elect, then there were recounts in 3 states brought by Jill Stein of the Green Party. And we all placed our hope that that would turn things around, and it didn't, because recounts almost never change the outcome. Okay. It's the chances is just statistically so incredibly slim. And in this case, it's virtually impossible. So we don't have to worry about that. And then the next thing, but I know we all put our hope in this idea that the recounts in those 3 states after the 2016 election might overturn it, but they didn't. They didn't, and that was the reality. And then we placed our hope in faithless electors, faithless delegates, And so December 14th, 2016 came around, and there actually were 7 faithless delegates, more than any in the history of the United States. And it still didn't change the outcome. Okay. So, but that's, we went through that. It's a psychological coping mechanism. And the Republicans are going to go through that too. It's a psychological coping mechanism. They're going to hold out hope until the end because they don't want to accept reality. And mostly Donald Trump. If Donald Trump would just accept reality, then they would have to accept reality, but he won't. So he's going down his delusional rabbit hole, and he's taken a lot of other people with him. And unfortunately, some of those people are emotionally and mentally unstable. And that's the really scary part. But anyway, just to put your mind at ease, I thought, okay, what do I feel is the next most important chart to look at? And I decided that the new moon eclipse on December 14th is the next most relevant chart where this is concerned. And I'll be looking at other charts between now and December 14th, but because I like to look at the astrology for all kinds of reasons. But as far as the idea that somehow Trump can turn this around, I just wanted to give you more astrological evidence to say, no, he cannot. The other thing that I find interesting is that there were some Republican astrologers out there who predicted that Trump would win, like Joni Petrie. And I think she's just fine as an astrologer. But when I saw her make that prediction, I thought, you cannot predict something this important when you have such a stake in it. And that's why I was really careful to really try to stay in the language of probabilities. As much as I might like to say, oh yeah, I predicted Biden, if I'm to be completely honest and authentic with you, which I always am, then I know in my heart, I was really, really careful about my language because I knew it was too dangerous for me to predict Biden winning because I had too much stake in the outcome. I could not be objective. So, yeah, so I was really careful about my language. And I'm also very relieved to see that we made it happen. And Biden and Kamala Harris made it happen. So, and everybody who voted for them made it happen. So let's go look at the next most relevant chart, which in my opinion is the Newman Eclipse on December 14th. And there are two things about this chart right off the bat that make it super important. One is it's a new moon eclipse. It's a total new moon eclipse, okay? That in itself is important. And secondly, it's exactly on December 14th, which is the day that the delegates meet in the Electoral College to cast their votes, okay? So if Trump and the Republicans think that somehow they're going to overturn the outcome because they get recounts or because they bring court cases, no, they actually can't. The delegates will still meet on December 14th and they will still cast their votes. So if the next thing they think might happen is that the delegates will, there'll be enough faithless delegates to turn it around. No, there won't be. So let me show you, okay? Here is the new moon eclipse in Sagittarius, 23 degrees, 8 minutes, conjunct Mercury direct, conjunct the nodes, okay? And what's interesting about eclipses is just like any pattern of new moons and full moons, we normally think of the new moon coming first because it's something new, followed 2 weeks later by the full moon, and then there's a completion cycle. But in actuality, a lot of the time in any given sign, the full moon actually comes first, and then the new moon. And this makes sense too, because you have to complete something in order to begin something new, okay? So embedded in any new moon eclipse is also the release of something old, okay? The ending of something old. It's just, it's embedded in a new moon eclipse. And so that's what's happening with this new moon eclipse is there's a release of something old, which is the past, and there's the beginning of something new, a new life cycle, okay? And it's also interesting that it's conjunct Mercury because Mercury rules the elections. And this is a total new moon eclipse, okay? So it's about you know, I mean, the fact that it's even happening on December 14th tells us it's about the nation getting a new president. And it's also interesting that this new moon eclipse is in Joe Biden's first house. And the first house and the 10th house are really the two most important houses when you are having a significant life change. So the other thing that's really interesting about this chart, now he does have Uranus square his Pluto, but so does Trump, okay? Because Trump also has Pluto in the very close to the same position in Leo. They both have Pluto there in that position in Leo. So they both have Uranus squaring, which means that both of them are, they have there's this questioning of power, okay? And they're both experiencing that. And it's unfortunate that Biden has to experience that, but it's just a reality. You know, this is something he will have to live with. This is part of his presidency. He has to live with the fact that there's going to be a large portion of people who will choose to question his authority and choose to question his power. And that's just something he has to live with. Whether, you know, we may not like it, he may not like it, but it doesn't matter. It's still the reality. And then, let's see, this is natal. This quincunx is natal, so that doesn't really matter. It doesn't have anything to do with the transits. And then Mars here is making a quincunx to Mercury. So that's basically Donald Trump there, questioning the election outcome. But that doesn't mean he's going to be successful. So the other thing Biden has in his favor is he actually has a Venus return on the exact day of this new moon eclipse on December 14th. I mean, that's just so amazing to me when I look at astrology, you know. He has a Venus return that only happens one day every year. And this is the day he has his Venus return, the day of the new moon eclipse and the day that the Electoral College meets. So that's pretty fascinating. Not only does he have a Venus return that day, it's sextiling these planets here, and Pluto, mostly Jupiter and Saturn. Okay, you can see that that's 28 degrees of Scorpio, sextiling Jupiter and Saturn at 28 degrees and 29 degrees of Capricorn. Okay, so this is bringing the conclusion. There's something new, and then there's something concluding. Okay, and it's, you know, you can see here it's very favorable to Joe Biden. Okay, so then let's go and see how it's landing on Trump's chart. And you can see he has this configuration called the Rack of Doom. That's where you have these two parallel blue lines with a red X in the center. That's called the Rack of Doom. And to me, this always reminds me of the flailed man, or the flayed man in the Game of Thrones. So if you're familiar with that, then you know what I'm talking about. It was a form of torture. They would put people on the rack and then flay them. And so he has that configuration, and Donald Trump has that configuration in his chart. And that's what he feels like. He feels like the flayed man. And so, you know, because he's not getting what he wants. And then, oh, the other really interesting configuration about this particular chart is Pluto opposite Venus. No, not Venus. I mean Saturn. Pluto opposite Saturn. Oh, I forgot. He has a vertex there too. Let me go ahead and put that in. And I'm going to do one more thing too. So I'm going to add in the vertex, which is fate. And I'm also going to widen the orbs, so put more alignments in there. You can see how intense that is when I widen the orbs. So, so again, Pluto over his vertex in his sixth house of work is exactly opposite his Saturn. Okay. And you can see how intense that is. Not only is the Rack of Doom more intense and the opposition's more intense, but you can also see that figure of God configuration that I talk about a lot, which is the opposition pointing like that straight over to his vertex and Pluto. And then the two inconjuncts, which are the blue lines that form a kind of, I think that's called an isosceles triangle, like that. In astrology, we call that a yod. Okay, those two blue lines in an isosceles triangle pointing to his vertex and Pluto in his sixth house of work. That's called the finger of God. It's extremely, extremely karmic. Pluto is extremely karmic. The North Node is extremely karmic, and the boomerang yod is extremely karmic. And as I've said many times, back when Paul Manafort got arrested and tried, he had a finger of God configuration in his chart, and he ended up in jail. So that is not a good alignment to have. And we all know that if Donald Trump weren't president of the United States, he would be in jail right now. All right, so let's see what else. Then, of course, as always, he's still got that Neptune, which is now direct, moving into an exact square to the nodes right over his full moon eclipse. And there's a truth that he's supposed to be facing, which he doesn't want to face. So I'm going to show you more detailed information about what does it mean when you have Pluto, which is in Capricorn, by the way, which indicates government, in his sixth house of work, opposite his natal Saturn. What exactly does that mean? So let me take you over to a more in-depth analysis of that particular alignment. So, so he has transiting Pluto in opposition to his natal Saturn. And so this is, by the way, just a general interpretation. This wasn't written specifically for Trump. It was written for anyone who has transiting Pluto in opposition to Saturn. Okay. This will be an extremely stressful time for you and demands an enormous expenditure of energy. So this is what an astrologer would be saying to Trump if Trump was just some average querent. The areas of life that are affected by this cycle are places where you already feel a sense of challenge, and you learn to face your fear as you learn to face your fears and insecurities. Ironically, you may ignore the importance of these issues as a way to escape facing your fears. Now these areas become very important due to external pressures, but how difficult this process is will normally depend on how strong your defenses are. But unfortunately, his defenses are not very strong, and they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker. You may experience the threat of loss in a situation that you're desperately holding on to or depending on for a sense of security. Oftentimes, what you're holding on to is your resistance to change, which is more necessary now. This is not the best time to strike out in a new direction, as you need to address and question the foundations you already have in place, and wanting something new in your life may just be another way to ignore what's happening in your present circumstances. Now, in this case, I would say if I were speaking to a client like Donald Trump and I knew what his situation was, then I would say, you know, what he really needs to do is let go of his resistance to change. And he really does need to strike out in a new direction. But I think that the way this applies to Trump is that instead of accepting that it's time for him to change, he's trying to strike out in a new direction, which is to instead of just accepting the outcome of the election, he's trying to petition for recounts, and he's trying to bring court cases, and he's trying to use media to his advantage. And those would be the ways that he's trying to strike out new directions to get back what he's lost, okay, which he'll never be able to get back, instead of addressing and questioning the foundations he already has in place. And, in other words, like, he could accept that, being a former president is not a bad thing to be. You could still be very popular, make a lot of money, have a lot of prestige and power, even as a former president. But unfortunately, in some sense, he's going to destroy that. And so as we continue through this analysis of transiting Pluto in opposition to Saturn, I'll explain, like, at the end of this video, the destruction that he's actually causing to himself, because he's actually destroying what he could build on. If he could accept his loss with grace, he could build on what he's already built over the past 4 years. But instead, he's going to ultimately end up destroying that. He's self-sabotaging here because he can't let go. He can't accept that change is necessary. So it says you may lose a big client that you depended on for your income, or experience a loss of property, which is funny because he is losing a big client, the biggest one, pretty much in the world. He's losing the American people. That was his big client. He's lost his big client that he was depending on for his income, and he's experienced a loss of property. He's like losing his house, literally. Overwhelming pressures may force you out of your job or demand that you relocate away from your support system. Yep, that's what's happening. In some situations, it may be appropriate to fight the pressures you feel, but it's often best to let go rather than fight, especially if these obstacles are essentially out of your control, which they are. As disorienting and confusing as this process may be, the struggle to rebuild your situation is where the benefit of this time is found. Weakness in what before seemed so reliable may appear, forcing you to face the possibility that certain areas of your life may lack the security that you had assumed. Attempting to maintain what no longer is dependable can deepen any instability. One purpose of this cycle is for you to make necessary corrections so that you are more aligned with what really matters. Persisting in an adverse direction, you likely encounter strong opposition to your efforts. Oh, yeah. Even being on target, you probably must contend with pressures to stay focused. Occasionally, you can become so obsessed with the task at hand that you block out everything else. While this can keep you on track, it also can cause inflexibility so that you are less able to adjust. Generally, this interval makes things very clear so that you recognize what must be done, even when it is difficult to accept. So eventually, he will have to accept reality, whether he likes it or not. One feature of this cycle is an urge to contract. While it can mean that you hold tightly onto what you don't want to give up, even if it is no longer of practical use, it also can signify that you eliminate all that is unnecessary so that the core remains. Now, again, this is what you would say to a normal client, okay? I don't think the message will get through to Trump. In arriving at this point, you can distinguish between what is important and what is not. Although your options typically are restricted now, you can choose a new path with certainty once you recognize this difference. Because of the reductive nature of this alignment, this period can imply losses. Usually, whatever is taken away now ultimately allows you to appreciate what is truly meaningful. Now, whether or not he will is extremely unlikely. Again, this is written for a normal querent, a normal client, not someone who's mentally ill, in my opinion. Often this process requires a major restructuring in certain areas, and it can indicate a time of fewer resources at your disposal. Yes, he is definitely losing resources. Everything's falling away. Assets may need to be consolidated, and you may avoid undue risks in order to conserve what you have. Sometimes you may attempt to exert unbending control over situations or people in order to fortify what you already have. While you can make things happen through sheer determination, typically there are unwanted consequences when you force any issue. Battles with those in authority, as well as a crisis with your own leadership, can occur. Okay, so all right, so I showed you everything that's happening, and I think I made it pretty clear that what he's trying to do is statistically impossible, and fundamentally, it's not even legally possible in the end. It's not going to change anything, no matter what he does. He can't change anything. He may be obsessed with it. He can't let it go, but it's not going to change anything. He has to accept his losses eventually, and unfortunately, I think I'll take you back and real quick look at that inauguration day alignment, because that's where the speeding train is heading. Donald Trump's, disaster train that's where Donald Trump's disaster train is heading for. And I was looking at Mark Kelly because I know he is married to Gabby Giffords, and she was the one that was shot. Okay, so Kelly's wife, oops, I'm talking about Mark Kelly, the one who is now Arizona Senator, Democrat. Kelly's wife, then Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, was shot and nearly killed in an assassination attempt on January 8th, 2011. 6 people died in the attack. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because, when I talk about the fact that Donald Trump is obsessed and cannot let go, I just gave you a very thorough interpretation of what Pluto opposite Saturn means. And it's someone who is obsessed and cannot let go. But unfortunately, because he can't let go, he's destroying what he already has. You know, he thinks he's going to be able to hold on to it by staying obsessed, but the opposite is true. By not being willing to let go gracefully, he's actually destroying what he has. And so I wanted to point to what happened with Gabby Giffords, because the violence that was committed against her and these other 6 people who died, and I'm sure there were probably others who were also hurt. This was really instigated by the Sarah Palin, and because there was something on her website where she had Gabby Giffords in the crosshairs of a rifle, and then someone took that seriously, and some mentally and emotionally unstable person took that seriously, you know, and went out and committed violence and killed people and seriously injured people. And you know, nobody takes Sarah Palin seriously anymore, except the fringiest of fringy people, you know. And that's what's going to happen to Trump, you know, because I mean, he's basically going down the path of more like a presidential version of Sarah Palin. And so let me really quickly again show you this inauguration day chart, because that's the disaster train that Trump is headed on. And so, and on inauguration day, and he's taking a lot of people with him. And what's really scary are those people who are mentally and emotionally unstable and what they might do. And, you know, somebody in the comments asked me, can you do anything to warn, you know, the Republicans or whatever, you know, can you do anything to warn people? No, unfortunately I can't, because, you know, what are you going to do? Call the FBI and say, I'm an astrologer and it's really scary that day? That's not, for them, that's not evidence. They would just think I was a kook. You know, astrology to them is not evidence. You know, I'm sure a lot of people are nervous. They're nervous too. We just have to trust that they are doing their job to the best of their ability. And I know that they are. So that's the best we can do, is just put our faith in them and their ability to do their job to the best of their ability. And they know it's dangerous. This is their job. You know, they're not idiots. So, and I don't mean to imply that anyone who asks that question, can we do anything? Can we warn anybody? I'm just saying this is what they do for a living. Okay. They don't need an astrologer to tell them that this day it is fraught with danger. Okay. They will do the best that they can. We have to trust that. So, yeah, so this is the direction that Trump's disaster train is going in, and it's going to crash, and it's going to take some very disturbed, mentally and emotionally unstable people with him. But he's destroying himself along the way. And like Sarah Palin, you know, he's a narcissist and a sociopath, and he doesn't care who he hurts in the end. But other people will care. So just keep that in mind. He will pay the price. He absolutely will. So, you know, people make their choices and they face the consequences of those choices, and he will too. So that's it for today. You know, I put a lot of thought into what I wanted to say in this video, because I really want you to understand that there's a trajectory here and it cannot go off course. The only thing that can change, because we do have free will, is a person can choose to learn. A person can choose to change. And a person, when they choose to change, when they choose to learn and grow and change, they can make the karmic consequences of their actions less damaging. And that's up to the individual. You know, and unfortunately, you and I can't do anything about whether or not Trump's willing to learn his lessons and change. He will have to face the consequences of his choices, as will anyone else who decides to go down that delusional rabbit hole with him. And that's just reality. All right, so I guess I will look forward to your comments, and I will see you in the next video. So again, if you have not yet subscribed, please click on that red button in the corner and subscribe to this channel and ring the bell for notifications. And thank you for liking this video. Thank you for sharing it with friends and family and on social media. And thank you for all of your comments. If you need a reading, there's always a link below. If you want to become a patron, there's always a link below or at the end of this video. So that's it for today, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.